Welcome to Pathways to Stillness. I'm Dr. Gary Irwin-Kenyon, a gerontologist and Tai Chi instructor. On this show, my co-host Vicki Hogarth and I explore how the practice of stillness can transform the way we see aging, death, and loss, and how it can help us understand our lives as a story.
It's great to be here with you again, Gary, on episode 9. I can't believe we're already this far into the series. It's going along quite well.
It is. It's wonderful to have 9 episodes already.
And for people at home, they can go back, whether it's repeats on the channel, but also on CHCO's YouTube page where you can see past episodes, but really you can jump in wherever we're at. Though we did end last episode with an exercise that I'd love for you to give our readers again. It was on page 96 that we asked. I can read it actually. The next time you encounter a stressful situation, try first to step back instead of running or resisting. A stillness practice of your choice will be of great help in developing this attitude. This could include yoga, mindfulness practice, meditation, and relax into stillness movements at the end of this book. I am curious though, when you are practicing stillness, what is your go-to in a moment where you really want to be present?
Pause. Now that's much easier said than done because so often it's automatic behavior or real stressful situation and just get overwhelmed. So I try my best to pause, take a breath, and then just see what's coming, what's happening, and maybe do nothing for a bit and breathe.
It's we say this all the time, easier said than done. I know that in my own life, I was telling you before the camera started rolling, when I was younger, I would actually both metaphorically and literally run away from things. I would move cities often, take a new adventure, but sometimes for me that was a way of avoiding dealing with maybe grief or a past issue, was just to start a new chapter of my journey instead of addressing some things head on, and I'm getting better at learning to do with age. But what do you encounter when you're talking to students about what their biggest issues are trying to just embrace stillness?
Well, being overwhelmed is a big one. And everybody's got a different pathway to that too. Some will call up somebody they know. Some will go for a bike ride or a walk. Some will just try to have somebody to share their issues, their stressful issues with. Those are the main things.
And we talk about this too, but why bother? I know from my own personal experience, a long time ago, I realized that, like, for me, giving up drinking was important because it allows me to be present, completely present, instead of going to a turn-off button that I think when I was younger I used to rely on when I didn't want to deal with the moment. And now I sort of force myself to always be present and to take in what's happening. But why bother going on a stillness journey?
Yeah, in the big picture, there's sort of different levels of things. I think first of all, by trying anything, especially the formal practice like meditation, Tai Chi, yoga, those kinds of things, you find that you relax. It's like your nervous system calms down, and that doesn't take too much. These exercises we've been doing on this show, some folks might have found them relaxing. So there's that level that affects different parts of our nervous system. I remember we did a study with some older adults volunteering in a sort of a yoga Tai Chi program, and we had a physician who took blood pressures at the beginning and the end of the session. So just an hour of practice, and there were significant drops in blood pressure for a whole range of people, and high blood pressure is a very common problem. So there's the physical part, and then there's the sort of emotional, psychological part of relaxing and bringing yourself to the present moment. That automatically brings away anxiety and depression because you're not at that point thinking about the past or the future. That's where all the trouble happens. we cause our own trouble by being too much in the past and the future. And then there's there's another benefit that it's paradoxical. The more you have, especially a solitary practice like Tai Chi or meditation, silence gives birth to love. That's what a monk friend once said. So it's paradoxical that getting quiet, bringing yourself in, will help you to deal with other people in a better way.
Oh, interesting. Can you
in a
expand on
calmer-
that a little bit?
Well, I think you drop some of your own stuff, your neuroses and psychoses, and or anxieties that prevent us from being present to the other person. So this automatically, with practice, helps you calm down, and then you're freer to be with another person.
I definitely, and I don't know if this is right, but I want to ask you, if I'm feeling extra emotional, I will try to tell myself to practice in what is becoming, thanks to the show, my own version of stillness, where I try to put thinking about something aside and just be present and give myself time in a way to digest it, so that my emotions don't take over. And then I find often I can unpack things a bit later. If the moment I'm feeling very emotional, I can just meditate.
Yeah, not use your doing brain, but use your being brain right away, and then see where it goes. That's why in Tai Chi we talk so much about following, not fight, flight, freeze, but follow what's coming in without a story. Remember, we talked about the second arrow, about just allowing whatever it is to come in, and not tell a story about it, and then see where there's a creative direction to go. Then there's some other benefits with more practice that are, I don't know if you would say more spiritual, not necessarily religious, but spiritual. And those are, you come to be in that present moment. And one of the books I read, this by a monk from the 19th century, actually, talking to his other monk colleagues, and he said, you get to a point where you feel that there's nothing to do and nowhere to go. You're just fine. All is well. They say that a lot in the 12-step program too. All is well. There are things to be done, about yourself or whatever, but all is well. And so there's there can be a pretty deep experience of silence. When I go up to a monastery in northern New Brunswick, I usually go there several times a year. They've closed now, unfortunately, so I can't go on retreat. But I go there for a few days at a time, and what I say is I put my keys and my wallet in the drawer. I have a little room, and that's it. I don't do anything except go to their prayer sessions, because that's very inspiring. So to me, one of my favorite things to do, some people think they can't do that, but they can't do it, but is to go there. 3:30 in the morning is their first prayer session. Go there 3:30 in the morning. It's out in the country, completely silent, dark, and you have these monks up there with their white robes on. And I just sit there and I say, it's just this deep silence. So there are more and more, the more you practice these kinds of things, the more you can get more moments of that, I'd say. For most of us, they're moments. You have an experience of moments of peace, I call them. And they can come in being in nature, being with your dog perhaps with Maud in the right circumstances. So you get these moments where, I've even said to myself, if I was to die right now, it would be okay. Everything's okay. So those are some of the reasons why it might be worthwhile, from practical to more, well, they're all practical, but to practice stillness of some kind, to have a stillness practice.
And we were talking about on today's show, grief is going to be a big theme in today's show, and the stages of grief, how we unpack grief. And I was wondering if you could give people a little overview, because sometimes grief is what pulls you back into thinking about the past, and also, thinking about the future, or the loss of something. You look ahead to what might be a void or a time of sadness, instead of being able to stay present. Grief can sort of tether us to both the past and the future. But there are ways to look at grief in a way that we can understand it better by looking at the stages.
Yeah, I think the stages of grief by Kubler-Ross, which was back in the 60s, but it's still very used in many contexts. And this denial, anger, bargaining, depression, acceptance. So when it first came out, it was often picked up as a stage theory. And in social science, a stage theory means everybody goes through these stages and everybody goes through them in the same order. Well, that wasn't necessarily helpful to people who are going through grief, not in my opinion, and other people who've written since. You can't, it's just not true that everybody goes through the stages, and not true that they go through them in the same order. So it's better to think of them, ultimately, I would think of them as themes in the person's story. That softens it up and makes it more flexible. But I also think they're very helpful if looked at as a guideline or a theme. I think when most of us, when something serious happens, not nice stuff happens, we'd go into denial or shock. And that's very natural, I think, because our being is protecting us. Our animal brain, too, is protecting us. So that's not a bad thing. It's more when that goes on a longer time that it may have to be looked at. But that's also a personal sort of thing. Some people get over things very quickly. I remember when I went through a nasty period many years ago, and I was really having a hard time. And a friend of mine said, oh, I had that happen to me. That was no big deal. Now, what do you want to say to somebody who tells you that? You feel like, I got 2 words for you. So it's very personal, but there are guidelines too, that if you're feeling that denial or moving to the other one, next one, anger, people get angry, but they're most often angry at life or at why did this happen to me? When is it going to end? What did I do to deserve this? So we get angry. We get angry at the universe, or some people say, yeah, it's okay to get angry at God even, because this is not very pleasant stuff. So that's a second stage of things beyond denial. And then the third one is bargaining, where you try to make a deal. And it depends what it is. If it's a financial loss or a relationship loss, or maybe a serious illness, you try to bargain with, again, God or the universe to give you a break. There's a common one that somebody is terminally ill, and they ask the universe or God to allow them to stay alive until a loved one comes, like a child, from away. And there's literature about this. It's uncanny how many times this happens. So what the explanation of that, who knows? But bargaining is another stage of this process. And somebody can go from bargaining back to denial for a while, and then back to bargaining. Then the fourth one is depression. And they say this is not quite clinical depression. It's more, I interpret it as in my life story, you're starting to realize what's going on. So you've denied it, you've angered, you've bargained. Now you're kind of getting, well, I guess there's not much I can do about this. And so that's a different kind of depression. It's sort of episodic. depression. And then the fifth one is acceptance. And acceptance is not giving up, but giving in. It's like, well, okay, I can't do anything about this, but it's okay. It's not what I want, but now it's okay. It's acceptance. And there's more recently a sixth stage that has been proposed, which is meaning. So it's not just getting to accept, but it's finding new meaning. And I was thinking about this yesterday, and I think if you got to the meaning stage, you wouldn't go back to any of the others. You'd sort of be through. But before that, the other 5 stages are, you can go back and forth. I did want to mention something somebody might want to look at with bargaining. Woody Allen wrote a very funny play about death. It's called Death Knocks. And it's partly about, it's about the stages and how this guy, typical Woody Allen character, will stumble his way through trying to give death a hard time, play cards with death, and if he wins, he gets to stay alive, that sort of thing. And there's a serious film about that, a Bergman film, called The Seventh Seal. And that's about a knight playing cards to gamble with his death, with death. Excuse me. So that's kind of how I would suggest, and others who have written about this, make it more open, more flexible. It's still a great guideline. I think you mentioned before we came on that it's an excellent guideline for me to look at these themes when I'm listening to somebody, my own story or somebody else's, and you listen to them and you say, okay, they're angry today, so that may help me figure out how to do. This would be a narrative care also. How can I listen to their story? What can I say or not say? Because many times nothing is the best thing to say. And or now they're bargaining today, so maybe I'll be quiet or I'll just listen. You get the idea. You can just follow through wherever the person is at any particular time. And that can help you, especially if it's long-term illness or some kind of loss that they're experiencing over a period of time.
Yeah. Do you find I remember my first major breakup in life, multiple-year relationship. I was in my early 20s, and I was devastated. And I had a friend who was in law school at the time, and he said, if you just read the stages of grief, he said, we're taught this in law school, that when we do practice family law, that your clients might be feeling different emotions depending on how far they are along in processing what loss they're going through. And he said, so read these and you'll realize that you're really not that special. And he said, and I know that sounds harsh, but it's going to be really comforting when you realize it's not that you're not special, it's just this is a normal human response, and that there is, light at the end, that you can work through this. And I did find it, at first it was a little shot to the ego that it wasn't my relationship. I might be able to get over it the same way other humans have done in times before me. So it was helpful, because I think it kind of gave me a process to look at and to know that it wasn't necessarily something that would last forever. But again, some things are easier than others, and sometimes we have those same stages of grief over, it might be as big as a job loss, or maybe it's even an event that's no longer happening. You can kind of have the same process. But do you find it's helpful in the practice of stillness to know those stages of grief so that you can kind of interpret what you're going through better?
Yeah, I think the story listening, especially, so that person's storytelling, your story listening, I think by listening to the story already creates an openness for stillness to come in. So it's not a direct practice, but I'd like to give an example of what you just said, sort of from the sublime to the ridiculous. I think it's true we can apply these phases or themes to even simpler things. Like, I know my personality, if my car, something happens to my car, I deny it. right away. My wife will say something's wrong with the car. No, it's okay. It's just click this button, it'll go away. So right away I go to denial. And then when I can't do that anymore, because it's obviously not working anymore, then I go to anger and frustration. And then I'll go to bargaining and say, okay, I got to get towed to the garage. I hope it's only, the muffler or something. I hope it's something small. And then I get to depression. It's, when I find out from the garage that it's not so small. And then sometime later, accept it, But it can be helpful in a way to recognize those things in yourself, even simple things or not traumatic things.
I do love, though, this is new to me, that idea of adding meaning as a final step to the stages of grief, because this is the first I've heard of it, but it does make a lot of sense that if you give yourself that time to process it, that the ultimate stage of putting it behind you would be to ascribe meaning to it. Because we talk a lot on this show about looking at your life as a story, but then there's also the paradox of sometimes stepping outside of that story and avoiding putting meaning on it right away. But how do you think ascribing meaning is that step that allows you to really move past it in your own journey?
Yeah. I think you get new insight, you can become more sensitive. Like in my case, a couple of nasty things that have happened to me. When I think I got to acceptance, but when I got to see, there's a purpose for this, and we're probably going to talk more about the purpose of suffering. I think that's what it is when you get to observe in yourself or in somebody else that there has been a reason for that suffering, that you have new life or a new partner or something else. You're more sensitive to other people's suffering, more willing to help out. Yeah. So that's the meaning stage. Or if I haven't had that, but if you're serious illness or a terminal illness, I imagine you'd have, I get some meaning, I have some reason for this happening to me. And that's pretty big stuff. But if you can get to have meaning, you transcend the whole thing, and you're ready for whatever's going to come up next.
I was telling you before the camera started rolling, I was out for dinner with girlfriends, and I realized I had gone through my stages of grief. My husband and I didn't have kids, and I was out with girlfriends that were talking about, the meaning of life and kids being a huge part of that. And then I realized they'd changed the subject very fast because I was there. But at that moment, I was about to say, actually, I think I've moved past it. I see my role at the TV station being a mentor, and I also have learned to embrace my life as it is. So it's funny how you can get past it, and then maybe other people think you're not quite there yet. But it was a realization for me that, wow, I really have found that I've embraced my own journey and the circumstances that are mine and have moved on.
Yeah.
I can't believe we're almost near the end of the show. So how do you want to end off with our exercise for everyone at home? I think there's still a lot to unpack with grief. It's an ongoing topic.
Yeah.
But how should we leave off today?
Let's try this one. It's called the single whip. So you have one arm out about 45 degrees, like you're about to push something, and the other one 45 the other way, with your thumb and your big finger and your wrist dropped. And you just look through your fingers, follow a few breaths, and tell your shoulders and your elbows to relax. So you're just kind of floating there in that position. You hold it we'll just do a little bit. Let's try the other side. So you drop this hand into the push, and this one, the finger and thumb together with the wrist down, and looking out through your fingertips. And then relax. Yeah, very good.
Nice.
So that again, if you do it for a little bit, I would say with this one, don't do it for too long at first, because it really, you don't think anything's happening. It really works your shoulders and your neck. And just following your breath, and once you get in these positions, you just try and let it go. Yeah, that's it.
And then the switch.
Yeah, finger and thumb and wrist. Yeah, that's it. Yeah, very good posture.
Well, another fabulous show, Gary. We will go into double digits, episode 10 next week, so I'm looking forward to it.
Thanks, Vicki. This has been great. And thank you all for tuning in, and look forward to seeing you on the next episode of Pathways to Stillness.